In the fourth contemplation, the last one is mental impression. What exactly is that? It's different from contemplation of the mind. Contemplation of the mind and mental impressions, they seem to be the same thing. But contemplation of the mind more deals with the sixth consciousness, which is the mano consciousness, which is the thinking consciousness. How many consciousnesses that we have in you, in me? We have 8 consciousnesses in a plural form. In Buddhist sutras, there's more than one consciousness. We have 8 consciousnesses. The first one is the eye consciousness, the seeing consciousness, the ear consciousness, the nose consciousness, the tongue consciousness, the touch consciousness, which is the body consciousness, the 5 consciousness. Those are the 5. Those are the 5 are dealing more with externalities. Eyes, they don't see inside. Can the eye see your organs? The eyes see outside. So they are more or less reacting to externalities. And these are the senses, the sensory consciousnesses. The 5 consciousnesses. I don't want to go into details because we have 100 hours on consciousness. Get into YouTube for the 8 consciousnesses. The 6th consciousness is the mano consciousness, which is the thinking consciousness. Contemplation of the mind emphasize on the thinking consciousness. The thinking consciousness is your present, more on your present life consciousness. And if we can give you an example, thinking consciousness is the manager of all your sensory consciousnesses. So in other words, your eyes, your ears, your nose, your body, and all these has to have a supervisor, right? That supervises all these senses. Your eyes can only see, but your eyes cannot judge. Can your eyes by themselves judge the color? Or can the eyes judge, this is a good man, this is a bad man? The eyes are only perception consciousnesses. So you need the thinking consciousness to make decisions, to analyze. And this manager is very powerful, the mano consciousness. We call him Mano. This guy's name is called Mano. You just remember this name, M-A-N-O, Mano. Mano consciousness, the 6th consciousness, the manager, Mano consciousness. The mano consciousness was in the 3rd contemplation of the mind, that deals more with the mano consciousness, because the mano consciousness is extremely powerful. Why is he extremely powerful? Who is doing all these, making all these decisions? Decisions to intoxicate, decisions to cheat, decisions to love, decisions to be jealous, decisions to have anxiety. All this is the mano consciousness that is interacting, that is making all these troubles and sometimes making all these benefits, make loving people, rendering help and all that. That's mano consciousness. And this mano consciousness is so powerful that he can dig into old files. All this perceptible consciousness, the eyes, cannot dig into old files. You know what I mean by digging into old files? They're digging into history. Can the eyes dig into the history of what the eyes saw yesterday? No. Only the thinking consciousness, the manager, can. The salesman, the saleslady are not permitted to look at old files, to check their what have they done, to get bonus. So the thinking consciousness can think about a past, the thinking consciousness interact with the present, the thinking consciousness worry about the future. Very powerful. And we have to train our manager only to do good in the contemplation. In other words, we tell the manager not to agonize on past experiences and not to attach to happy times. Just let them go. You have an abusive childhood, but it will never come back again. Why do you have to agonize on it, bring that abusiveness into the present and always think about it and get depressed about it and get hatred about it? I hate my dad. Why do you hate your dad? You've been abused by your dad who was drunk at one time and it was gone already. But why do you bring that agony into the present and start to agonize yourself with it? Are we not foolish? Are we not foolish in bringing all our failures in the past onto the present and to get depression about it? No, we don't need to. The past is gone. Why are we so stupid? Bringing bygone into the present and agonize on it, or bring in bygone happy times and think, oh, I should have happy times. How come I didn't have any happy times now? And why did my wife desert me? Why did my wife desert me? Why did my children treat me this way? So we have to tell the manager, don't attach to the past, to do this contemplation. And we have to tell the manager not to worry about the future. The future hasn't come. You have depression, you have anxiety, you have fear, you're afraid that you are sick. But being afraid of sickness will not help the sickness to heal with it. You have a cold now and you worry about a cold because you can't attend a meeting tomorrow because of that cold. And then you worry about that cold. You think by worrying about the cold will go away? No, it wouldn't. So why are we doing that? That's a habitual attachment of the manager. So the Buddha said, train your manager in the contemplation. In the third contemplation about the mind, train your manager to be better. Train your manager. The fourth is contemplation of mental impressions. How is it different from the third? The fourth deals with two consciousnesses. The seventh, which is, it has a name in Sanskrit. We call it the manas. Not mano, manas. Manas means what? Ego. You have that ego consciousness. The manas consciousness and the alaya consciousness. The alaya consciousness is the banking consciousness. So the fourth contemplations deal with cleaning up the seven consciousness and the eight consciousness. The seven consciousness, if I can give you an example, assuming our whole consciousness is a conglomeration of a company, it's a company. We have the salesman, eyes, nose, ears, and all that. We also have the manager, which is the sixth consciousness. Now, the seven is what? The board of director. What would the board of director do? The board of director, they only care about what? Self. Are we making profit? You guys, you got to work. We are investors. We're directors. Are you making profit? So they only care about themselves. They're egoistic. The egoistic. Everybody has that seven consciousness, which is the ego consciousness. When you were born, you brought that ego consciousness along. So you were born egoistic. We were all born egoistic. Look at the baby. When a 1 to 2 year old baby, when they were fighting the struggle for toys, they grab each other's toys. And if they grab away his toy, the baby will cry. They always try to protect one's ego, protect one's self-interest. We have been habitually doing that for many, 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 many lifetimes. And in the process of fulfilling our egoistic interest, we hurt, we kill, we lie, we cheat. That's where we created our bad karma. And this egoistic consciousness needs what? Needs desires to fulfill. And in the process of fulfilling those desires, we are creating a lot of karma. Avasas, or avasas in the Sanskrit language. A fermentation of all this accumulation of deeds, thoughts, and actions. So that's the seven consciousness. And then finally, the banking consciousness, which is the lie consciousness. What is this banking consciousness? Give an example of a company. The salesmen have performances, profits were done, and the whole company accumulate all these assets, all this equity, all this liability, everything in there. What does this contain? It contains, with the conglomeration of the company, it contains all the memory. You won't get away. You think you did something wrong in this life and you can get away when you die? That gets stored in your alive consciousness. It will never get away. Just as you key in into the keyboard, into the memory chip, it will never get away. It's waiting for karmic energy to show up. Every thought has karmic energy. You nurture a thought of hatred, that would get stored. You nurture a thought of loving kindness, that would get stored. Everything is stored because you key in the information through the keyboard. That is the banking consciousness. So what are you storing in your banking consciousness? Good karma or bad karma? According to some sutras, mostly bad karma. Imagine what you do. Have you been altruistic in everything you do, or you've been selfish and egoistic? You know. So what are we going to do in our next life if we don't get enlightened? We roll with our accumulated karmic energy into the next life. And the plight and the conditions of next life would depend on what kind of attributes and qualities that you have built in this life. What have you been building? One day the Buddha Sakyamuni, he held up a handful of sand in his hands and he said, those who were humans now and reincarnate again into the next life as humans, they are as few as the sand in my hands. And those who were humans now and reincarnate into animals, vicious rams, were as many as the sands on the ground. So we cannot guarantee that we'll be humans in next life. You watched out. So my answer has to be too detailed. I don't want to deal with it anymore. I can go on and go on, but next question. So I already answered this question. That's the difference between the third contemplation and the fourth contemplation. The third is the manager, the thinking consciousness, and the fourth is the egoistic consciousness plus your banking consciousness. They have to be dealt with in the different situations. You need different contemplations to deal with them. Next question. From the mindfulness, you said we should empty our mind, but wouldn't it be better to fill it with kind thoughts? Of course. What is the nature of a thought from the perspective of morality? What is the nature of a thought from the perspective of moral virtue? It's either bad, good, or neutral, right? Bad, that means vicious. Good, that means loving kindness and all that. The nature of a thought is either bad, roughly, good, or neutral. No exception. If you cultivate bad thoughts, bad effects will come back to you. If you cultivate good thoughts, good effects will come up to you. And if you cultivate good thoughts, for example, you're always helpful, you're always loving kindness, you're a philanthropist, you donated all your assets, all your estates into helping others, and you don't have ego, you donate everything. That's like the best beneficial good thoughts that you have. And when you die, what happened to you? What kind of karmic energy? The loving kindness, the metta, the compassionate energy would what? Would elevate you to heavens. And there are 28 heavens. You'll be a being in heaven, enjoying only happiness. But when the period of happiness for thousands and millions of years is all used up, you still roll back to samsara because you haven't really attained complete awakening. You just enjoy all the good deeds you have done to be qualified in heaven. So there are people in heaven, but people in heaven, going to heaven should not be the ultimate way. Going to heaven, good karma is still not pure karma. It still have the dichotomy of good and bad, tall and short, rich and poor. It still have a thought in it. It's only when you go beyond good and bad, go beyond neutrality. That's what we call pure karma, if we can call it. There's no such thing as a pure karma. A pure karma is not speakable. How can you speak about pure karma? So you have to go beyond good and bad and neutral to be in that awakening stage where we call it, I don't know how we call it, nirvana, Buddhahood. We cannot stereotype it with a name. We don't know how to call it. But for the sake of calling it, the Buddha called it nirvana. The Buddha called it enlightenment. The Buddha called it anuttara samya sambuddhi. That's what it is. So it's good to fill it with good thoughts in your mind, but good thoughts only qualify you to go to heaven. And when the enjoyment period of heaven, which could be thousands of years, is all used up, your karmic energy will pull you down to reincarnation and samsara again. Only when you are beyond this world into a place where we are call it awakening, then you'll be out from samsara. You understand what I mean? Okay, next question. What is the meaning of the wooden sticks and the tapping on the ground during meditation walks? This tapping are not to scare you. So for example, when we're tapping on the front door, on the door, we say, hurry up, because people usually spend, we say 15 minutes, they could spend 20 minutes talking. Actually, we don't talk during meditation. We don't talk before meditation. We are talking too much. I remember a Zen monk said, you know what is meditation, what is awakening? Don't talk for 30 years. You arrive at realization. We've been talking too much. What do you do when you're talking? What mind you're using? We're using discriminative mind to talk. Hey, this guy is good, this guy is bad. When are you coming back? Where are you going tomorrow? How do we enjoy ourselves in the party tomorrow? Everything you talk about is regarding what? Ego, greediness, hatred, love. Because we talk from the what mind? From the thinking mind, who is the mano. Your mano is talking. Your manager is talking. That manager stereotype, stigmatize, despise, discriminate. We talk from those. We don't need them. We don't need those. We have to go beyond that. Next, when we meditate, are we to use the practice of Satipatthana to lead those thoughts? Yes, but we only have begun. We haven't even ventured into Satipatthana. We have more to talk about. If you're interested, you can always go into Google and say Mahasatipatthana. There are terms in there. But I don't know if you understand the words, because it's usually in very subtle language. What I'm doing here, I'm just using my experience to simplify it for you. If you read those sutras, they are in very high level language that a beginner may not understand. And I'm still in the process of learning. There's no end in learning in Buddhism. Buddhism is not about reading books, you know. It does not mean that if you are a PhD in Buddhist studies, you are a Buddha. It does not mean that you're surrounded by books of Buddhism and tapes and videos of Buddhism that you will get enlightened. Otherwise, the librarian is already a Buddha. He's being all surrounded by books. So just by reading and all these videos and all these tapes, and you go on be egoistic, selfish, can you be a Buddha? You are only knowing Buddhism in the language. You're not practicing it. You're not purifying it. And what is even worse, you think that you are a PhD in Buddhist practice, you are a Buddha. That increases your ego. Get rid of language. Language is an obstacle sometimes. Get rid of desultory thoughts. Don't let a thought comes up. When no thought comes up, what comes up? When no thought comes up, what comes up? Wisdom comes up. And what is wisdom? You cannot find it. Wisdom is something that you cannot find. It's just there. Where does the universe comes from? Where does air comes from? From the north, east, south, west? If it comes from the north, how come it comes from the north? How does it generate it? Where does water comes from? Some people say it's easy to answer. From the water tap. Right? Water comes from the water tap. There's a kindergarten approach to origin of water. If you have where water comes from, we can get an answer. Water comes from where? Water gets evaporated under the sun, according to photosynthesis, that it gets on, become clouds, and clouds get into the sky, it cools down, and comes back as rain, and rain comes back as water. So what's the origin of all this? And some people say, it's easy. Chemically, it's H2O. 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen. Where does the oxygen come from? Where does hydrogen comes from? We don't know. It's just like when, at the time of the Buddha, there was a disciple who asked Buddha a question. Tathagata, you have to answer my question. Otherwise, I won't continue to practice. What's your question? How is the universe made up of? What is the universe made up of? And then Buddha gave a parable, which I just mentioned. There was a guy at the crossroad being shot by an arrow, and everybody crowded and said, whoa, this man gets hurt. He's almost died. One guy said, where does the arrow comes from? Who is the culprit? And the other guy said, no, we have to know that arrow. Is it made of wood or metal or glass? Another guy says, is it poisonous? Another guy says, oh, we got to inform his family. Another guy said, okay, let's take him to under a tree where they can get some shade. They ask all kinds of questions about the origin of the arrow. How come this man get into the crossroad? Is it violating the law of this country that they cannot have jaywalk? They ask a lot of irrelevant questions. And then this guy lying on the ground said, stupid, get me to the hospital. Don't ask silly questions. Call 911. Why are you asking all these silly questions? 911. No. We have to find out where the arrow comes from first. What's the origin?